The evidence is that the eye sees what the brain knows. In Goethe's famous dictum, was weiß man, sieht man. I say it's the outcome of our brains being programmed by a noetic imperative or storyboard. An observer faced with a datum outside his storyboard can react with, "Ah, how interesting," or "Oh, that's stupid," or "impossible," or "doesn't make sense." But they cannot process such a datum. They can't engage with it. They can only dismiss it. It's below their perception threshold. In the example of Iran Air being downed, what was in play was what might be called a temporary storyboard. The petty officer's perception was skewed by his fear. What we need to address is that there is a permanent storyboard, that all incoming data are subject to the tenor of one storyboard. The storyboard acts as a filter on data, filtering in only what's in accord with it. So it sets parameters on our perception. The images we project to create the world we live in are not drawn from just our sensory inputs. They are the product of an interplay between, on the one hand, our sensory input, the frequencies of outside, and on the other hand, our storyboard, what we might call the frequencies of inside. What this means is that the virtual reality we can perceive, what we call nature, is a creation of two inputs: sensory input and storyboard. The sensory inputs that ripple through our brains filter through its storyboard and either stay relatively raw or come out transformed or deformed, depending on how well they fit in with the content of the storyboard. Any datum, no matter how novel, can be processed by the rational mind if it fits into storyboard. Any datum, no matter how valid, cannot be processed by the rational mind if it does not fit into storyboard. To sum up, we need two things to be on the same wavelength if we are to perceive a datum: one in the body and one in the mind. Something in the body has to be able to match the datum in frequency, and something in the storyboard of the mind has to sanction the datum. Werner Karl Heisenberg, a German theoretical physicist who was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1932 for the creation of quantum mechanics, has determined that natural law is not the observation and explanation of nature. It is the interplay between nature and ourselves. Clearly, he had noticed that sensory input does not come into a tabula rasa, a blank slate. On the contrary, sensory input comes into a rich drawing board. While a passing emotion can be a temporary filter on data, one's storyboard is a permanent filter on data. I analyze it as comprising three stories. That is why I said think of it as a storyboard. And these three stories program the mind. Why program? Because they are not subject to change by rational discussion. Only experience can do that. Only experience can effect a conversion, a change of one storyboard. What are these three stories? They are the stories that address the following three questions, and every culture on earth has them. Where am I? What am I? And who am I? Where am I is about context. What is nature? What is reality? What's my location? What am I is about belonging. What my origins are determine where I belong. Who am I is about identity. What's the dynamo that runs me? What makes me tick? Heisenberg's interplay between nature and ourselves is an interplay between the three stories that program our brain and sensory input. This has revolutionary implications. It shows that all knowledge is subjective because the storyboard is subjective. It means there is no such thing as objective knowledge. That is why, if we want valid knowledge, it is so important to scrutinize the three stories that frame the self, whose interplay with nature creates the reality we inhabit. We have looked at the new story of location that science gives us. Just how profoundly different a story it is can be gauged by the fact that logically there is no reason to suppose that heaven and hell don't have just as real an existence as our own space-time universe, simply on a different TV channel, so to speak. These three stories come in a set. When one changes, the others have to change to accommodate it. The conventional stories of origins and identity just don't fit the new reality. They are now shown to be as unnatural and against the order of nature as the old location story of a physical universe. In parts 2 and 3, we will look at the new stories science gives us about origins and identity. Just how profoundly different these two new stories are can be gauged by the fact that they show our political model, the sacred cow of democracy, and our medical model, the sacred cow of biomedicine, are mere superstition. Such change portends turbulent times, medically, socially, economically, and politically. If science has rewritten these three stories, it means the ones we believe now are fiction, unnatural, against the order of nature. Time to change to the real stories of location, origins, identity. Time to get real about what ripples through our minds, creating our reality. Time to get real.